Most people know Rivers Cuomo as Weezer's brilliant, quirky lead singer. But one thing you may not know is that several years ago, a bizarre conspiracy theory started to make its way around the web that Rivers was actually Kurt Cobain. As in, Kurt staged his suicide in 1994 and carried on living his life as Rivers Cuomo. While Nirvana and Weezer are at seemingly opposite ends of the 90s music spectrum, a closer look reveals they're actually a lot more similar than you might think. In anticipation of Weezer's ambitious and incredibly catchy new album, OK Human, Rivers explains to Rick Rubin why the band ditched their classic guitar-based style for an orchestral sound. They also talk about the specific substances that Rivers took to write the hit song Hashpipe. And Rivers entertains the Kurt Cobain conspiracy and plays along with Rick as if it were all true.
This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond.
Here are old friends Rick Rubin and Rivers Cuomo talking over Zoom.
Have you seen the website, the conspiracy website that says that Kurt Cobain did not kill himself and that it's actually you are Kurt Cobain? Have you seen that?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I hadn't seen the website before, and then just yesterday somebody forwarded it to me. Is that like suddenly going around for some reason? I know that conspiracy's been around for a long time.
I don't know. I just saw it. I just saw it the other day and thought, interesting. And I thought might even be interesting if I were to ask you questions as if it were true, because that could be fun for both of us.
Yeah.
So if you were Kurt, tell me how you imagine you would have transformed yourself into Rivers.
Well, first of all, I'd have to stage my death, which seems easy enough. And then, the Blue Album came out a month later after he died.
You could have been working on that like for years.
Yeah, and I know he seemed to be very interested in very innocent, naive music. Like they covered the Raincoats, which is not that different from Weezer, I guess. Major key, and we kind of picked up that ball and ran with it. So yeah, I think kind of running the opposite direction from grunge and, wear the button-down shirts and cut your hair short and sing with a very pure voice rather than a rock voice.
Yeah, it seems like that would be a nice, if you were tired of being Kurt Cobain, this might be a nice career decision, like get away from all that madness, essentially cancel the past, and start anew with none of the old pressure of being in this a band that changed the world, and where you could just have fun and write pop songs and enjoy yourself.
Yeah, I guess the grass is always greener, but I think for everyone outside of Nirvana, it seemed like he had it pretty good. Like that's what we all wanted, right? We want to be not only the band that's selling 10 gazillion records, but like the band that everyone knows, like they've revolutionized music and culture. They're always going to be that band. And the rest of us, we're just like little dwarfs kind of dancing around their heels.
But it looks like it felt bad enough for him to either end his life or decide to become you, one of the two.
Which is better?
It's just different. Stylistically, did you have any in the transition from the songs you wrote for Nirvana versus the Weezer songs you wrote? Did you decide to like really clear the decks and think of it in a new way?
I think it all came about because I changed my style of singing. Now, when I was singing with a very thick rock voice, so many overtones and all this distortion naturally in my vocal cords, I was able to sing one melody 4 times in a row and call that a verse, 4 times in a row and call that a chorus. And no one would get tired of my voice because it was so rich. But once I started singing with a very pure voice, like a choir boy voice, like you hear in, say, Buddy Holly, I had to change my melody writing and my chord writing because the voice just wasn't as rich. You got to put the variation and the richness into the composition. So at that point, I started writing a lot more involved chord progressions and melodies.
Interesting. Did you let anyone at all know what was going to happen, or did you play it all pretty close to the vest?
I let my lawyer know. But apart from that, I wanted a complete break.
Were there any things that happened early on where you felt like you might get caught?
No, there's been these conspiracies and movies about me, about my death, and I don't think anyone's really ever come close to figuring it out because Weezer's just so different from Nirvana.
Yes and no. Yes. I mean, you both do the soft, loud thing. You've sort of kept that in the repertoire.
Yeah, I did that without even noticing, honestly. Yeah, it's just a habit I hadn't yet broken.
I thought the idea of adding the glasses was a great idea because it really is like it's a perfect, it camouflages your face in a way that it really does create a new persona.
Yeah, but I did wear them in a big Nirvana video. I was in Bloom. So it's just like a little breadcrumb for people who are really paying attention, I guess.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah. You know, I was actually shooting that video that gave me the whole idea. I was looking back at it and I was like, you know what? I look pretty cool, man. This is just like the biggest FU to what everyone wants from Nirvana is me in these dorky glasses.
Yeah, I remember meeting you backstage at a Chili Pepper concert, and I didn't make the connection when I met you, the Rivers you. I didn't make the connection then. But now looking back, it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I was probably pretty out of it when you met me the first time, right?
You were pretty out of it when I met you the first time. You were pretty out of it both times, actually. Both first times. In a different way. Let's talk about how your songwriting has progressed over the years. You can start back as far as you want. If you want to include the Nirvana years or not, up to you. But your relationship to music and how your songwriting has evolved.
Well, started out just about the guitar, really, and wanting to shred and thinking if I get fast enough with these harmonic minor scales, if I get my metronome setting up high enough, then I'm going to be a huge rock star and it's going to be great. So I moved with my band to LA and we tried to shred our way to a record deal and nobody was interested. They were interested in like something called songs and hooks and lyrics, and I was like, what the heck is all that about? But that became like technique for me. I was like, okay, if that's what it is, then I'll practice that. I'll work on that and until I can shred a chorus, basically.
What were you listening to at the time that the shredding was going on? What were your inspirations then?
That would have been Yngwie Malmsteen and Paul Gilbert, and there's a number of other lesser known shredders. You know, it's all instrumental guitar solos, and the band fell apart. It was tough. It's 5 guys in a one-room studio apartment on Cherokee, right off of Hollywood Boulevard, and you know, you'd turn the lights on it when you come home at night, and thousands of cockroaches would scatter all over the kitchen counter. You know, it's just no fun for most guys. For me, I was like, this is amazing.
Where did you move from?
In this story, I moved from a small town in northeastern Connecticut. And when most people think of Connecticut, they think of New York, but New York seemed about as far away as LA to me. I was closer to like Providence, or, you know, there was really no city around me. It was a rural college town right where UConn is. There's a strange number of really talented musicians, like talented technically, because we all just sat around and practiced scales and arpeggios with metronomes. And so eventually 5 of us moved to LA. And when that fell apart, I got a job at Tower Records. And it was there that every day for 8 hours a day, I was being exposed to, quote, cool music. And at first, it just sounded like complete noise to me. It was like Sonic Youth, Pixies, as well as early Nirvana and Beach Boys. Pet Sounds reissue came out around, or CD version came out around that time. And they hammered it into me day after day. And gradually it came to sink in and have a real influence. And I'd go home at night pretty tired on the bus and get to my apartment, and I got an 8-track recorder. And actually, that's when I started singing. I was like, well, my band broke up. Till that point, I'd just been the lead guitar player. And now I was like, well, somebody's got to sing. So I tried to sing, and it sounded like somebody trying to sing early Nirvana, basically. And I came to really love what I was doing. I'm sure nobody else would have, but it was very cathartic. And I would sit there and listen back to my cassettes and just, I don't know if I literally shed tears, but I felt very emotional listening to my own voice and my own songs. It's like, yes, that's exactly how I feel, which in retrospect, of course, that's how I feel. I wrote that. It was about how I feel. I knew that's what I wanted to do at that point. So, and it was also through that job at Tower that I met my friend there who knew the other guys in Weezer. So he got me to jam with him and included those other guys. And there were a few false starts, a few strange iterations, including 60 Wrong Sausages, but eventually it turned into Weezer.
Amazing. Lyrically, when you started writing those first songs on your 8-track, and you said that the song sounded like you felt, do you remember lyrically what you were writing about? Would it have been based on something that you saw or something that you felt? Would it have been diary-like, in other words?
Yeah, not so much external observations, just more like my own feelings and my own philosophies. My own points of view, my own realizations. That's what it mainly is. It's like, oh, this is what's going on in this situation.
Beautiful that you were able to feel it and tap into it and express it. And I imagine cathartic for you to give it voice and get it out, as opposed to just having it inside and drilling a hole in yourself.
Yeah, I think I often use the word cathartic. I'm not sure that's exactly what it is. It's more like when I clarify exactly what's going on and I'm specific about it and I get it in words and melody, it's almost like I've got it outside of me now. And now I'm healed. And I don't necessarily have to fall into that pattern anymore. There's an example on we're working on a record right now called Okay Human. And there's a song called Numbers. And that one, I found myself, I don't know what song we had out, but every day I was checking a chart, like some radio chart. Oh, at first it's like, it's going up. This is amazing. And then of course it's going down. It's like, oh, this other band is getting higher than us and we're falling. And it was very painful. And then, it's like checking Instagram, how many likes or followers do I have? And how many people retweeted this tweet I posted, and I realized I was just spending a lot of time and emotional energy looking at numbers, which were telling me what my worth was. And so I wrote a song specifically about that. There's always a number that'll make you feel bad about yourself. And so since I wrote that song, I don't, maybe as soon as I start to feel that instinct to check a number, I'm like, no, I don't need to do that. I know what's going to happen.
Beautiful. Is there ever or always a relationship between the valence of the lyrics and the sound of the music?
I remember hearing very frequently when we put out our first album that there was a big mismatch between the emotion of the lyrics and the emotion of the music. Many people said, the music is so happy. It just makes you want to smile and jump around. But man, these lyrics are depressing. So I don't know how it happened, but when I'm writing it, there's definitely a match. But when people are hearing it, there's a mismatch.
And I think sometimes there's something really interesting about that, like hearing an energetically happy song with really sad lyrics is much more interesting than one that where everything's just matched. It plays on different levels and it gives it depth.
Yeah. And I think I just love happy music. Or maybe happy is not the wrong word. It's more like triumphant and uplifting. I don't like music that's too like weak and sad. Matt always would say what he loved about my music writing was it sounded like somebody waving a big flag from across a stadium just in triumph. So he called it my flag waving.
Yeah, we would use the word anthemic sometimes when we would talk about some of your hooks. When you wrote one of those, like, wow, that really sounds anthemic.
That's right.
It's a great feeling.
Well, I've certainly tried many different approaches in the, how many years has it been? 20 years?
Wow.
I could be a decade off. Math is not my strong suit. But,
yes.
This album I'm talking about, OK Human, is all piano. Not just piano compositions, but I don't play any guitar on the whole album. It's just all on piano. And with the orchestra, that is very different. And I'm able to do all this stuff that I just can't do on a guitar. And I just posted this cover of my song Heart Shaped Box, or my, in quotes, song Heart Shaped Box from my album In Utero. When I first started practicing it, I was doing it on guitar, and it sounded like what you'd expect. It was basically like Nirvana cover. And then I was like, heck, I'll try it on piano. And man, I was like doing all this crazy stuff as background music on the piano. It's like playing this symphony orchestra on the piano. And it feels like this massive new frontier for me to explore.
Did you originally write that one on piano?
No. I wrote that on my Fender Mustang, and I did not even play piano back then.
Cool. When did you learn to play piano?
I learned to play piano right around the time, right after I staged my death. It was like, okay, let's try something totally different here.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one would expect Kurt to play piano. The glasses, the piano is like you're home free.
It's a good disguise. And now the mustache.
Yeah. I almost didn't recognize you. I feel like it's a Beatles era mustache. I can't remember which one, but if we look at the Let It Be album, someone has that mustache.
Yeah, it might be Paul.
Maybe. Or George. It may have been George. I can't remember. It definitely feels like...
Yeah. And they had glasses, too.
Yeah. And the hair could work. I mean, you could be a Beatles.
Yep.
So it'd be Nirvana, Weezer, Beatles would be your order of...
Wow. 3 favorite bands right there.
Can you be in one of your favorite bands? Does that work? Are you allowed to be on your list of favorite bands? Are you allowed to put yourself in it?
I feel like if your band is unique enough, because, I mean, no other band makes me feel like Weezer, so they have to be. I love the music so much, and there's nothing else quite like it, so they have to be on my list.
There was a point where you decided, even after being a very successful musician, to go back to school.
Yeah.
Tell me what you were thinking.
Now, this is the time at like mid 2000s as we were finishing up Make Believe. Is that the time you're talking about?
I think so.
Yeah.
I remember there was a moment where we talked about the schedule had to be around the Harvard schedule because you were going back.
Right. Okay. I seem to remember I really wanted to get married, and it seemed like a good place to meet somebody if you want to get married. Maybe not so much anymore, but there was a time when that was the result of going to college, is you'd find somebody and get married, and you find a lot of like-minded people there. of course, I have many motivations for anything I do, for whatever breakfast cereal I pick in the morning. But that I think that was near the top of my list for reasons. And also, I just like finishing stuff I start, like in a slightly OCD way. Like, gosh, I'm so close to having a degree. It doesn't really matter. I don't really need it, but why not just finish it up? And then, of course, I love learning. And that's why I went back in the first place in the mid 90s at the height of the Blue album success. I was just so bored going around the country over and over on a tour bus. There's just no intellectual stimulation. So we happened to be in Boston, and I went to Harvard, and I was like, man, this place is great. Let me get an application. I filled it out and I got accepted. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to do this. And it was fun. It's really stimulating. And even now, every morning, first thing I do is log into Khan Academy and start working on algebra. Totally useless. I was right when I was 14 and not doing my homework, that, there's no use for this in my life as a rock star, but I just like these little puzzles and working on them, and keeps my brain occupied and stretched out and tickled.
This is the opposite of what you just said, but I'll ask. It just occurs to me, was there any part of you that felt like, well, I guess you said the boring aspect of repetitive nature of being on tour. Was there any sense of escaping your rock star life by going back to school?
Well, definitely the first time I went there, we were at our low point interpersonally, and the whole experience of becoming a rock star was pretty disillusioning, as it was for apparently so many musicians of our generation. Like, you finally get this thing you always wanted, and then you're miserable. It seems like that doesn't happen as much anymore, but one of the many motivations was, I want to get away from this, and I don't know if I'm ever coming back, and I just want to disappear and screw that whole life, basically.
Well, I'm glad you decided to go back to school instead of feigning your suicide again, because I'd be really sad if Rivers was believed not to be alive. I'd miss you a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
We talked a little bit about the way you've written and the way that you've tried different things, but essentially the way you wrote on your new album and the way you wrote on your first album are pretty close. Is the way you appreciate music the same?
No, I think in the early 90s, I would get obsessed with a record or a few records, and often it'd be an artist or a few artists. I remember I was just mad about Jesus Christ Superstar soundtrack, all the Beach Boys stuff, especially Pet Sounds, all the Beatles stuff. Then there was Van Morrison Astral Weeks and Love Forever Changes. So I'd go through these phases of real deep obsession with a particular album or artist. And now I've gotten really into computer programming, and I wrote this program that creates a Spotify playlist for me every day. And it's extremely eclectic and wide-ranging. Anything I could possibly be interested in, it will take a sampling of it, and then it mixes it all together and presents it to me every day. And so I just listen like that. And I just very quickly go through songs, like, because it's easy for me to mark, like, okay, I don't want to hear this again for another 800 songs, or I never want to hear this again. I never want to hear this artist again, or I want to hear more of this album. I can give it these all the instructions to the algorithm very easily. And so the playlist is constantly evolving for my taste every day. And I guess it's a very different way to take things in.
Tell me tell me more about the algorithm. How does it decide what to add to your list?
Okay, so it gets some songs from pop radio and alternative radio, some songs from top songs on iTunes, and some of the playlists on Spotify, today's top hits, and then any songs I've heard, sometimes I just happen to hear a song and I like it. So it will add those. And then songs from New Music Friday. And then there's a bunch of specific playlists I like to take samples from. Beethoven, Bach, heavy metal, bubblegum pop, Rolling Stones top 500 albums, and then whatever albums I happen to be interested or I'm checking out. Like right now, Mitski is in there, and the White Reaper. Then alternative 90s, hot country, Loretta Lynn. And then I have a cool playlist called Obscure Weezer, which is basically every Weezer or Rivers solo song that is not in the top 40 songs I always have to play. So it'll be songs I may not have heard for years, and it's really cool to hear them pop up randomly in this context of that is so wide ranging. Suddenly I hear this song, Weezer, a song I made 10 years ago, and it's like I can hear it with these really fresh ears.
It's great. Does it ever do they ever come on, and does it take you a moment to realize that it's one of yours?
Yeah. Sometimes it's a real treat, like, wow, this sounds amazing. What is it? And then I realize, oh yeah, that's us. That's cool.
Yeah, it's a great feeling when that happens.
Yeah.
The surprise aspect of it. I can remember once Shazamming a song that was just so cool, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was a record I produced a long time ago. Like, completely blanked on it.
That's great.
In the world of being a rock star, what's the most fun part of it for you?
Man, it's really hard to pick. There's just so much stuff that's so great. So maybe I'll just rattle some things off. I don't know if I can rank them, but the high of singing a song for an audience, you have some stage fright. You have some extra hormones coursing through your blood. So you're just operating on like peak efficiency, and your brain's just so concentrated, and you can hear like the subtlest little movement of spittle in your mouth against your tongue when you're pronouncing a word, and it's just such a high to be in that concentrated state. I love that. I still love writing, getting my my observations out very precisely, and yeah, it's maybe precisely because I have such a hard time explaining it with words. If I get it in a song, it's like, yeah, that's my mode of communication.
So cool.
Maybe the biggest ego reward you get is when you're in front of a giant audience. Not even giant. Okay, even in a small club, I still play these little shows, and when the audience is singing along, and it's a B-side or an obscure old album track, and everyone's singing every word like they believe it and they mean it so much, and it's so important to them, and they're just declaring it to the world in unison as this big chorus. And like, this is something I came up with. Like I put those words on paper, and look at what it's doing for all of us. And I mean, that is just the greatest reward for an artist.
That was one of the things that I found really interesting when we met. You explained the different ways, the lengths you would go to write songs. Do you want to share with us how you wrote Hash Pipe, the process?
Yeah. Well, at that time, I was taking very careful notes on all the parameters that went into any given songwriting session, and like what time of day it was, or what I had eaten, or what kind of drama I'd lived through in the last 24 hours. And it's somehow in my chain of experimentation, I had the idea to try Ritalin, and not connected to that. I was also reached a point where I wanted to try 3 shots of tequila. So that day I had a Ritalin and 3 shots of tequila. And, a few minutes later, I went into my backyard, sat down with a paper and pencil, and in about 2 minutes, wrote the song from start to finish in my head, and then onto the paper, not even a guitar in my hand. And my whole nervous system was on fire. It was like total frenzy, and felt exhausted right after. And I went up and took a long bath. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. And I haven't tried it since. Maybe I should.
Tell me about the history of this album. What's the beginning of the OK Human story?
Okay. I'm bad at history because everything, I'm, like you, very in the moment, and then I just kind of forget everything that happened. But let's see. I remember, I guess a couple years ago, I went to Jake's house. Jake is the producer. Jake Sinclair. He produced our album called The White Album, two albums ago, and he's more known for Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco. He did that really big song High Hopes by Panic at the Disco. But I know him as the guy, the front man for a Weezer cover band called Wanna Beezer. So he's like a real hardcore Weezer fan.
Great.
But very, very talented young producer. So I went over to his house, and without even an intention of starting a project, I was just going to say hi. And he said he had an idea for an album for Weezer. And he described it to me, and it's basically what we just finished making is exactly what he set out to make. It was really his vision from the beginning. And what he said was, no electric guitar, it's just going to be you on piano, and you're going to bring in all your love of classical music, and we're going to use an orchestra, and you're just going to totally go for it with the songwriting and the lyrics, and don't try in any way to be successful. You're just going to make your weirdest, wildest, most Riversy, Weezery record you can make as a songwriter. And he gave me a reference album too. It's an obscure album called Nilsson Sings Newman, which I'd never heard before. And it's similar to what I just described. It's this very quirky, odd, unsuccessful commercially, but super interesting album.
Were all of the songs written specifically for this project?
Yeah. Okay. Just about every answer I'm going to give you is going to have an asterisk by it, which is except for the song called All My Favorite Songs. So that one is like kind of last second. Here is a song that just came up. It wasn't written specifically for this album, but it sounds like it could be a big song, have a much broader audience, and it sounds like it could go on the album with a few tweaks. I guess we have yet to see whether it's going to be the song that everyone actually knows from the album or not, but that's the intention. It's the first single, and there's like no rules when it comes to the first single.
Yeah, well, the beauty of I listened to the album without knowing that, and I absolutely love that song. And if anything, I felt like that was the template for the whole album. So it did
Great.
not stand out as not belonging. Just the opposite. It felt like, oh, this is the perfect song, and now we're going to do a whole album like this.
Fantastic.
So let's talk about that song. How did that song come up? What was going on? When did it happen? Tell me the story of that song.
I think that one came up really recently, like maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and we were actually working on another record. We were finishing up our heavy metal record called Van Weezer, and my manager sent me an early version of the song with a chorus that was written by one of his favorite writers. Her name's Ilse, and it was actually like a country song. In fact, he sent me a small batch of country songs, like song starters. And I just started playing around with all these country songs, not really knowing what they're for. And that one, for some reason, when I sang it, it sounded like, wow, this sounds like a big universal song. It still sounds like Rivers and Weezer. And we could kind of massage it onto a couple different albums. It could be on a metal album. It could be on OK Human. We could make a country album, and let's just start fooling around with it. So we tried to put it on, I think we tried on Van Weezer first, but in any case, it just as we shifted gears into making OK Human, we realized as much as we loved the album, it would really benefit from having that big flag waving single that brings in a wider audience to what is probably a pretty difficult album. So we started tweaking it to fit it on there, and it worked out really well.
Yeah, it fits like a glove. And again, not knowing the backstory, I would have assumed that was just one of the batch that you wrote, and it was a particularly great one, and it sounds really like you. And the fact that that started with someone else is shocking to me, because it sounds like a perfect Rivers song.
Great.
Do you remember, by any chance? I know we history is neither of our long suits. Do you have any idea what the first song that you wrote for the OK Human album was? Any memory?
Did you hear the song "Bird with a Broken Wing"? That might not.
Yeah.
Okay. That might be one of the first, or "Playing My Piano."
Yeah, "Playing My Piano" is spectacular.
It's cool.
One of my favorites. So I'm imagining that ending was an improvisation of looking for lyrics. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my original voice note when I was first writing the idea, and I couldn't come up with the lyric for the last line. I was trying all these things, and finally I gave up, and I just sent it to Jake because I liked the melody. He's like, "Yeah, this is great." And there's a couple spots on the album where he's like includes these things where you're like, you're not supposed to show that to people. There's this one spot in what is it, La Brea Tar Pits, where we were tracking the basic tracks with Pat on the drums, and right in the middle of the song, his wife calls, so he just stops playing. He picks up the phone, he starts talking, and Jake puts it on the album, like the song where we're playing the song, and the song stops, and then you hear Pat talking to his wife on the phone.
I think those might be some of the best parts on the album. I mean, it creates a reality. It's like, this is really happening. This is not this plastic thing wrapped on a shelf. This is a live moment in time, and it's a real sense of reality. And I was really moved by that ending. I thought it was beautiful. You looking for the words. and how each of the choices was good in a different way, and all equally hopeless in their message.
I like what I eventually settled on, not in the voice note, but months later, it finally occurred to me. It was one of those things where, like, I know the answer is going to come, but there's just no way I can sit here and try to force it. I just have to put it away for a while, and then one day it'll just pop into my head. And hopefully that's before we release the album. And that's what happened, luckily.
This really feels like an entirely different world, even though it still sounds like you and it still sounds like your songs. How did you go about recording these songs? Obviously, it's different than the way you've recorded anything else, because it's essentially a different band, even though it's the players of the players.
It was the most insane recording process. It just made me so anxious through the whole thing. I just really had to trust Jake, because he had a very strong idea for how he wanted to do it. And it just totally ass backwards. So pardon my French, but okay, so this is what we did. We got together at his house, me and Pat and Jake, and Pat never heard the songs before. And they handed me an acoustic guitar, actually, and a microphone, and said, "Okay, play your songs." And then Pat's just going to play along he's like right across from me in the same room, no baffles. He's just kind of playing softly. And we did like 2, 3, maybe 4 takes of each song. And those were the drum takes. So, what you're hearing on the album is Pat like hearing the songs for the first time and trying to figure out like how it goes, and talking to his wife on the phone. And it is just kind of terrifying as the songwriter. Like you want everything to go right. And so from there, and they really love that vibe, like that kind of exploratory and not too self-conscious or not playing a part you already know how it goes. So it has a real sense of vitality to it, I guess. So then they take those drums and he goes to he brings it to the arranger, and they listen to all my piano arrangements, and they turn that into orchestra arrangements, and they bring the session to Abbey Road Studios in London and record all the strings. And then they ditch my basic acoustic and vocal tracks. And so at that point, all you have are drums and this massive orchestra. And I mean, obviously that orchestra is usually the last thing you put on once you have a really solid foundation. Then they did bass, and then I did all my vocals. And then finally, and then Brian did all his stuff, little flourishes here and there, a lot of Hammond and acoustic guitar. And then finally I did my piano, which was supposed to be the centerpiece of the album. But in the final version, when you have so many tracks like this, you end up the more you mute, the better it ends up sounding. So we've muted so much stuff. And one of the things that got sacrificed was my piano, which is shocking to me because it was really supposed to be the centerpiece along with the orchestra. But the orchestra really took over what I was doing, and it ended up being much more interesting to listen to.
So all of the orchestrations are based on your piano parts?
Yeah, I'm really, when I listen to it, I'm amazed like how many of these cool little counterpoint parts and melodies you hear weaving in and around my vocal are actually from my original piano demos. Like, but then there's some that are not me, that they came up on their own. So my ego is totally satisfied because I feel like, wow, I did some amazing stuff. And I really contributed to the orchestration. And at the same time, I'm really pleased with the orchestra arranger, because he contributed a lot of incredible stuff too.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Rock My Audible.
Cool.
Where'd the idea come from?
I guess for a couple of years, I'd been every night listening to classic novels on Audible, and I'm not a great sleeper, so often I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd continue the novel then, and it was a really pleasurable state where I'm like not even half asleep, maybe a quarter asleep, not really getting the benefits of deep sleep, but I'm in this very like open, what is it, some kind of beta wave thing?
Yeah.
I'm just very open, like I'm living in these novels, and it was such a wonderful experience. Like, but during the day, forget it. I don't have the calmness or the concentration to read like 1,000-page novel or something and really get focused and drawn into it, or even listen to it on Audible. But it was just these nighttime Audible sessions that were so great for me. And so I wrote a song about it.
Great song. The chorus is really a super duper anthemic chorus, and it's so funny to hear those lyrics on that chorus, and it works great, but it's really haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I can't remember what it was. Like, I remember I went online. I was like, okay, I got to write a chorus, and I just went online and I searched for like inspirational phrases. And it was, oh gosh, I'd have to go back and see what it was, but some really cheesy inspirational phrase like "get up and go" or something like that. And so that's how I came up with the music and the melody. And then I was like, well, that lyric is not going to work. So I just kind of grafted my other story onto the uplifting music.
It really works like it's unbelievable. And interestingly also, by using the current reference of Audible, it almost has a hip-hop like modernity, because it's not unusual in a hip-hop song to hear Audible's a brand, to hear a brand flaunted in a song.
Yeah, or like Insta or something, but in my case it's Audible.
Yeah, it makes it very modern. It really does. Really good.
Cool.
I can't wait for people to hear it. I think it's really, really good. And
Wow.
it's refreshing to hear it sound so different, yet so much like you, and for the songs to be so great. It's one of my favorites of your work.
Wow. That means so much coming from you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Great work.
Well, I got to give Jake a lot of credit because I feel like I'm the same person I was before, and it was really his vision. And I immediately realized, oh, that's a really cool idea. Let's do that, and turned out just like he imagined. So, a lot of credit to him.
Great. Please thank him for me for making something that I love so much.
I will. He'll be very excited to hear you said that.
Thanks to Rivers Cuomo for entertaining that bizarre conspiracy theory for us. You can hear all of our favorite Weezer songs on our playlist at brokenrecordpodcast.com. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/brokenrecordpodcast, where you can find extended cuts of new and old episodes. Broken Record is produced with help from Leah Rose, Jason Gambrell, Martin Gonzalez, Eric Sandler, and Jennifer Sanchez, with engineering help from Nick Chafee, and is executive produced by Mia LaBelle. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. And if you like Broken Record, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond. Peace.